Welcome to the last module on Mounds Chapter 36, the last chapter of your textbook. Congratulations for making it this far. We're going to cover in Mounds Chapter 36 the other classes of the me verbs. Chapters 34 and 35 were dedicated to using ditto me, I am giving, as a paradigmatic verb for going over the forms for the me verbs in the indicative and non-indicative moods. We're now going to go over other me verbs, and they're going to look very similar to ditto me. In fact, in many ways, having gone over ditto me thoroughly, we'll give a more cursory overview of the other type of verbs because their forms will look very much like ditto me. And so once you've studied ditto me, you've already have started learning how to use the other forms of or other types of the me verbs. Ditto me is what we call an omicron me verb because its verbal root ends with a short omicron, but we also have alpha type me verbs, epsilon type me verbs, and upsilon type me verbs, and they're going to look very much similar to the forms that we saw in ditto me. So let's begin. For a good example of an alpha type me verb, we're going to use histemi. Its verbal root is sta with an alpha, and this means I am standing. And it's formed by having the iota reduplication. And notice that in its initial form, it does have the sigma reduplicated, but this sigma is going to drop because the sigma is a letter that doesn't like change in the stem, and as soon as you have change in stem, it tends to drop. And what happens is that in order for the word to remember that there was a sigma there, the sigma turns into a rough breathing mark. So we have a rough breathing mark in place of the sigma, and so that's why that rough breathing mark is there in the lexical form. This iota is not originally part of the stem. That's part of the iota reduplication, and so the verbal root is sta. So you take the stem. Now remember that with the ditto me verbs, the da turned into a do. The short omicron went long only for the singular forms, and you're gonna have the same thing here. The sta is going to turn into an eta for this first person singular, second person singular, and third person singular forms. But for the plural forms, it's going to remain the alpha. It's going to keep the alpha. And then there's no connecting vowel for the me verbs. And then you add the primary active suffixes for the me verbs, where the first person singular, third person singular, and third person plural suffixes are modified. And so to say I am standing, here's my iota reduplication, and remember there has to be a rough breathing mark. If it's not a rough breathing mark, it's wrong. Then I write the stem with the long eta, and then the suffix ending, histemi, is I am standing. Histes is you are standing. His state, see, or sin is he, she, it is standing. His sta with an alpha, men, histamen is we are standing. His state is you all are standing. And his sta, and since we're adding asi or asen, remember your big five two little rules. When two like vowels combine, it becomes one vowel. So it's esta, si, or sin. Hista, si, or sin, and those which is they are standing. And these are your forms. Let's say this together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Histemi, histes, histesen, histamen, histate, histasen. The next me class verb are the epsilon types. And so tithemi, which means I am placing, I am putting, like I place a cup on the table or I place an offering on the altar. its verbal root is the with a short epsilon. And because even though the stem or the verbal root is the, look at how it reduplicates. Just as we learned way back in chapter 5, if you have an aspirated letter, when it reduplicates, it uses the aired stop. So this reduplication is the tau plus the iota. So it's because an iota reduplication. So it's t plus the stem, and then again, just like didomi, where in the singular forms the short letter goes long. You can expect the epsilons for all the singular forms to go long to an eta, but it'll keep its short vowel epsilon for the plural forms. And then you add the primary suffix endings. To say I am placing, I am putting, it's t, the iota reduplication, the stem with the vowel change, and me, the suffix, tithemi, I am placing. To say you are placing is tithes. To say he, she, it is placing is tithesin or c. We are placing is tithe with a short epsilon, men. You all are placing, it's tith tete, and they are placing, it's tith si or sin. So let's say these forms. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Tithemi, tithes, tithesin, tithemin, tithete, titheasin. The last me verb type is the upsilon me verbs. And the upsilon me verbs are unusual because I like to call it a fake me verb. So it's a fake me verb in the sense that it only has certain characteristics of the me verb, but not all of them. So for example, you have the verbal root deknu, but notice that there are no reduplication. So there's no iota reduplication. But like a me verb, it does have the modified suffixes. And so to say I'm showing or I am demonstrating, it's like a me verb because it has the suffixes, but it's unlike a me verb because it doesn't have the reduplication. And so the forms are dek nu me, dek nu, and we would expect just simply a sigma, but interestingly enough, just for the second person singular forms, it does like using the connecting vowel. So again, we don't expect this to be here, but I call this a fake me verb. So it does use the connecting vowel here. So it's dek nu ace. And to say he, she, it is showing is dek nu si or sin. We are showing dek nu men. You all are showing dek nu te. And then they all are showing dek nu si or sin. And so let's say these forms for the upsilon me verbs. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Dek nu me, dek nu ace, dek nu sen, dek nu men, dek nu te, dek nu asen.